Hello, host, and just want to give you an update on the Merrill case that went to the Supreme Court, and I have an opportunity to travel to Washington, D.C. And to support the plaintiffs. We had representatives from the ACLU, the NAACP, and we have numerous of activists all over the country that came to DC on not per se participate in the case, but to kind of like support the plaintiffs in this case. And they was able to share their story. Arguments in that case, there was a rally that took place. Supreme Court was basically like maybe a block and a half. Also not too far from there was from so we was like right near the U.S. Capitol and the Supreme Court, and DC was like in the mid 40s, and it looked like the really cold, and so well as I wanted to be, I thought it could be a little bit more organized. As that I had with this rally is that they had more people speaking in Alabama, didn't have an organization in Alabama, then wasn't a that spoke. And I have a problem with that because this case is about versus Merrill case was the case of Alabama voters who said that the lines that was drawn was not only unconstitutional, but it violated the Voting Rights Act. And that was the question that was brought before the Supreme Court. And so from them towards the end of the trip, page on Facebook, we do have some coverage of the rally, and we posted so that you can hear the actual arguments as well. I really believe that there should have been more speakers who were from Alabama, not from Alabama. And we had an opportunity to kind of like give those that was there, particularly those that were from Alabama, because again, that's the case that's going to that if you're going to have an event like that, that the people that are most impacted take the lead. And I saw less of that. And I have a problem with that because now you're talking about, and the largest organizations, are saying that, therefore, I should be out in front versus the smaller organizations who, that's the problem, to me. I believe that the people who are on the ground in that particular should have the most opportunities to speak and being, but that's just how, I feel. I really believe that what it was, but through it all, there was some great speak. We do appreciate that organizers and organizations with Alabama. There was another case, Mulligan, Merrill, which basically talked about the representative lines, and they're saying in that case that it's drawn in such a way that it marks into choosing who their representatives wanted to be. And also to a lot of Senate or State House of Representatives, there are not represented by a minority person, but they're not competitive at all. And if you look at Republican or heavily Democratic, so you really don't get the whole picture as represent. And that was one of the arguments that was real quick, to kind of share some of my screen here. And there we go. So AL.com first. I thought that they have this landmark case, because this is one of the cases where the one from North Carolina, Moore versus Hopper. So this was from this article was written, and even though it was the day, I thought that this was pretty good. It starts out by and the Montgomery bus boycott, and then it goes into the future where a modern day civil rights activist by to meet, and he's like really down to earth person, and lives in Birmingham. So it starts out and from people from Rosa Parks to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and state in the past. And so right now, half a century after the civil rights movement has taken place, state of Alabama, in this redistricting case known as that has made it to the Supreme Court after, of course, it finally made its way to the Supreme Court. Alabama had received an increase. So there was an increase in population. Which of course, there was also an increase. So we're now close to 30%. So because of that, Alabama is actually congressional seat. So really, there's supposed to be 8. Not the 7 that we have right now, because there's been an increase in population in 2020. Not going to say they overlooked. I think they deliberately wanted an 8th district, because when they redraw the lines, because population, the state legislator, a second minority African American. And so this case, our Voting Rights Act of 1965, by diluting political power of in which they make up a majority or close to it. So it has to be sense. So it has to be a simple majority of minorities that live there, or or a simple majority of 50 plus 1. So in other words, there has to be, than it is a majority. And so that's why this lawsuit came about. The case of the Supreme Court to reduce the political influence of Black voters, but it also represented the government in the United States. Both major political parties have practiced that is probably as old as the country itself. So drawing of congressional and state legislative boundaries to cement been in control of the process in far more states since the 2010 elections. The share of state houses in U.S. House seats conservative or GOP policies, including abortion, the will of voters. The Associated Press that Alabama has one of the most gerrymandering congressional maps in the country. What you have here is that the 27% of the pipe color have in the state of Alabama is packed into one district. That is District 7 by Representative Terry Seward, the only congressional districts are heavily Republican. And the present analysis 2017 shows that Alabama has one in the country, and basically all of the population of African Americans and Republican dominated elected office or redistricting. So you can imagine that, you know, some of the things that this court, they don't want anything to do with that. And they delivered in creating a second district with a Democratic leaning Black. So basically you'll have 6 Republicans, basically, which of course would make up 1/4 of the congressional body. And it's a 3-judge panel that includes 2 appointees of former President Trump. That Alabama legislature likely violated the Voting Rights Act. According to the panel, Black voters have less opportunity than other Alabamans to elect candidates of their choice. Lawmakers should draw new lines for this year's election and create a or near majority of the population. But a vote of 5-4 in February, Alabama to allow this year's congressional elections to take place without adding a to suggest that it was too close to spring primaries to make a change. Diluted voting strength of Black residents by packing a large number 7th district, where 55% of the voters are Black, while fragmenting other Belt region and the city of Montgomery. The majority of the Black voters are at. Senior counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Represented the plaintiffs, and he was there on the afternoon where he was one basically talked about what went down in the if the Supreme Court does side with new map is going to be drawn. We do know that, and they're going to be ordered to add an 8. There's going to be a special election to where the people will be able to elect. Obviously, the whole map has to be redrawn. Map. Every district has to have the same amount of population. So for example, if you got 8 million people in Alabama, each state must have, each district must have at least 1 million. Those 2 particular and those 2 particular districts, the majority of the population that's pretty much what the outcome will be if the Supreme Court There won't be there won't be any re-elections representatives because that would have already taken place in November. There will be an election to this will represent District 8, Congressional District for the state of Alabama. So there will be an election for that. In this case, the plaintiffs of the increase in population in the state of Alabama an eighth. There's supposed to be an eighth district, and in this eighth district, predominantly African American. This article tells us who is his ancestors was enslaved in the black belt, and he's the of those who have been enslaved in the black belt. And again, just like many injustices that was connected to that, over the years. He mentioned that there's several major needs that includes generational poverty, the lack of adequate internet service, and a desire for a broader array of healthcare services. So those are on. This kind of gave their personal side to their experience. Along with an opportunity to speak, and that's going to be a that is connected to this case, as well. They had an opportunity to know what they feel about the case, and I had an opportunity to going to be. So I'll keep you abreast of when that on the OBS Australia broadcast section. This article kind of gives a little bit about representation in Congress that goes all the way back to the mid-90s. And how the chair of the both chairs were in charge of redrawing the lines. I think it's Senator John McClellan, Representative Chris Pringle. They are also in that lawsuit as well. And Attorney General Steve Marshall mentioned that it is based on a neutral partisan group of legislators, which is a lie. That was that. Was those when those maps was approved, it was divided by the majority of the Republicans voted for it, and Attorney General Steve Marshall, said in this article is not true. That's how the two chairs, McClendon and Preem, also, even though they proclaimed that they had used a race neutral, the packing of cracking of minorities in order to suppress against federal law. They still talk about this race neutral approach, which is also a lot. Does the 7th congressional district in Alabama looks like? Obviously, it's pretty bad. It snakes a winding path, state's black belt, a swath of land named for the rich soil antebellum plantation. And then it goes all the way to the city of Democrat Representative Terry Stewart, who has represented the district House members since she took office in 2011. And by the way, she was the state's other 6 districts have reliably Stewart was the only member of the Alabama's delegation to support restoring the most effective of the Voting Rights Act, which was gutted in a 2013 Supreme Court. The revisions referred to as preclearance forced Alabama and other states and Justice Department or federal court approval before making any. Some Black voters outside of Stewart's district said that they feel that their concerns Republican office holders in the districts that favored the GOP to pay. You have some Black voters that are outside the majority white population that they have, or the majority of the population is white. And so having a will allow African Americans voters in Congress, and also they will have an and address on the federal level. Okay. The federal government has been doing it in the last couple of years, and has been a voice for African Americans and the state of Alabama. Talked about some of the, and it talks about some of the stuff that that CARES Act money to the recent passing of the Inflation Reduction $1 billion infrastructure bill that was recently passed. You also have an African American who is running for, which, of course, the incumbent in ago. And so we had to find a candidate that is running. It's a race, and some of the same issues that Democratic nominee in District 2, Congressional District 2, and pretty much the entire Alabama congressional delegate. They voted against the PAC Act money. You know, they voted against the Infrastructure Act. Pocket costs for Medicare recipients. What else? We have done. They certainly voted not to expand That's pretty much what this article, you know, is talking about. You know, what actually, happened. Now that Justice Jackson, President Joe Biden, she really took these folks to school. Very abreast in constitutional law. So point in constitutional law, I consider her to be a great talked about not only the constitutionality, of a history lesson of, what was going on as well. The lawyer that represented this was very vague. They didn't have a, I do realize is that the Supreme Court in recent years have not really, and most of their decisions have been politically motivated. Like, for example, reverse Roe versus Wade a couple of months ago. It was politically motivated, and that kind of threw the panel. The plaintiffs are, it's not like they popping champagne. They are cautiously optimistic because so that the modern Supreme Court have not necessarily been following the rule of law, and so we hope that this is not pretty much there will be very limited to hardly no power that African Americans will have, really no voting power and no political power. There's another case, Moore versus Harper, that would be, that says state legislators should have the exclude in a theory known as legislator independent state legislator doctrine. That's what it's called. And in that doctrine, matters should be decided by the states, and the Supreme Court complete control over what's going on in elections. That means that they can draw destroy African American minority, voters. So in other words, we would go right back to which African Americans did not have the right to vote before 1967 years, to which we pay taxes in this country. Voting rights. So that case right there, Moore versus Harper, an article here that that talks about what exactly what exactly took place. Happened in this case. And so the question would be, violated Section 2 of the enacts. So the League of Women Voters, many organizations that stood in solidarity. Merrill. And again, the question is the Voting Rights Act by diluting political power of Africa. Again, that is, and I believe they had a pretty strong views that their maps are fair and race neutral, and that the drawing of second district were what are you talking about? I mean, the majority of the people, 80%, nearly 80% of the voters in Alabama are white. So white voters, by having a second congressional reverse discrimination. But here is Keninji Brown Jackson and voting practices or procedures is the act was passed in the first place. It was also act as in voting, as this case has pointed out. For every argument that the state of Alabama had, and not to mention insightful the state argument, the state case kind of like crumbled like I mean, it was absolutely mind-boggling. African American woman that's on the court was so knowledgeable, you know, bring historical facts that most mind-boggling, really mind-boggling. Go to Australia Broadcast Section Facebook page to where you would have opportunity and to see her in action. It's just absolutely just that she had handled herself. In that case, I was like, this is like that this case is rooted in white supremacy. You know, we already know that that's a given. Go there. That's another issue. So let's see what else. Because I pretty much covered, you know, everything. The justices, other justices, including Chief Justice Roberts, she took them to school. So I want you to listen to this. In the brief that was, you know, that was presented, Alabama audaciously attacked the three-part, which has been used for decades to establish whether a map did not. Justice Samuel Alito seems to question whether Alabama arguments was at the so real quick. What is the Jingles test? Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. So this was based on the 1982 case that was this 6 by the Supreme Court, rendering the districts of General Assembly of North Carolina impair the ability of Black voters to elect candidates of their choice, claims of voter dilution. This test. So these are the three roots. So these that was established by this U.S. Supreme Court for approved 1965. Number one, a majority group must demonstrate majority in a single member district. Number two, a cohesive. Number three, a group must demonstrate the minority group's preferable candidate. So what is that all? So first of all, minority group the group must demonstrate that it is large enough must be the minority. Second of all, the majority group must dilution of political power. And then finally, must demonstrate that seizures or discrepancies that indicate that groups. So in other words, number three, about the fact that is fair, especially if you have a person. We want to ensure that the election process is fair, that the vote goes test is. All right, so let's go back. So basically, Supreme Court Justice Alito, and that, yeah, that's pretty much what he was asked. And another thing I want to point out is that pretty much said that their argument against Section 2 of the voting, even though she didn't say it, outright, Alabama on the Gulf Coast were the community of interest that deserve protection. Black Americans in the Black Belt. She basically said that is wrong. That the Gingos test, the foundation criteria to ensure that there is no dilution in voting or political power, that in the state of Alabama, a history of discrimination in Black communities. That's one thing she did admit. And in these briefs, were able to tell their personal side of the story of why they believe have violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Here you have ordinary people, common people, a story to tell. And when this case went before the Supreme Court, they had an offer. The country would know just how. Once again, Alabama's in the news, and it's definitely not good. So that's the lowdown. So that's pretty much the lowdown of what happened here. And the Merrill case on Tuesday, October the 4th. For Solidarity was a little bit more organized, that they had more people from Alabama everything went pretty well. The trip was there. I did learn some things about more things about the case. Personal stories that was connected to the case, and I think that that's very important. You know, when we're trying to, you know, to believe that this is an issue of whether or not accuracy or not, the personal stories really help, and that's what this case has to convince the Supreme Court that what a Section 2 of the Voters' Rights Act. So that's pretty much our coverage. Our coverage here of the case. Milligan won't know. Right now, the court has not made a decision, and when so in the meanwhile, go to the Australia Broadcast Section Facebook page. The case. We also have like some background information, you know, on the case if you wanted to hear the arguments. You can also go to the same Facebook page on what's going on with the case. I hope court was side with the plaintiffs, but they were also and honor the Voting Rights Act. What happens? Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will continue. We will come back and we will report it. So until then, thank you so much.